First is that he believes that the Hindutva that he subscribes to, or the Hinduness that he subscribes to, is that of Swami Vivekananda. I'm actually happy you said that, because while Swami Vivekananda was happy to speak of universalism and universal brotherhood from the podium of the Parliament of Religions in Chicago, he was very, very clear that universalism cannot come at the expense of pixelation of history, and certainly specific disagreements, theological disagreements, which resulted in constant practice of exactly this value called toleration, this civilizing, condescending virtue called toleration, which was resulting in the proselytization of Indians en masse. So much so that at least in two of his works, I'm sure you're aware of it, sir, where he specifically refers to his encounter with a Christian missionary on a ship either back to or from India, where a Christian missionary was constantly spewing venom against the religion of Satan, which is Hinduism. Swami Vivekananda, despite his belief in universal brotherhood, was forced to catch the Christian missionary by the scruff of his collar and threaten him with throwing him overboard. If I may say so, that according to me is Hindutva or Hindu resistance in action, which is to say, I am more than happy to accommodate all your points of view, provided you first stop spewing venom against me in the name of your scripture. So the very same Swami Vivekananda, I am so happy that you've actually cited him, also went on to identify in, let's say, book after book after book, in fact in several tomes, the history of invasions from the 8th century at least until the 16th century. And this is something that he has never pixelated. So the great thing about these stalwarts or civilizational icons is that they were very clear that there is no inconsistency between recognition of the universal character of dharma and what dharmic communities and civilizations have been subjected to in the name of vidharma. Let's not call it adharma, let's call it vidharma. This is something that is starkly missing, and that's exactly what I've pointed in my book, which is to say that there is a filter called coloniality or colonial consciousness, which actively prevents this particular country, and specifically the majority of this country, from accessing specific aspects of its past and putting it in deep slumber in the name of secularism. Because just as you have a problem with, let's say, the concept of tolerance, so to speak, European history, and I'm absolutely sure you're aware of this, is specifically clear about the Christian origins and Christian nature of secularism itself. Such being the case, I think when this particular community stands up and says, I've had enough of secularism and I've had enough of this inclusivity that is specifically telling me forget everything, you keep citing Dalits, you keep citing everybody else, but you don't wish to talk about the treatment of Kashmiri Hindus and the specific causes behind it. You don't wish to talk about what exactly has happened in Bengal immediately after elections from the 2nd of May. You don't wish to talk about, let's say, certain pockets being created in Assam in the name of religion, dare I say. You don't wish to talk about what is, according to me, the longest running insurgency in this country, which is the creation of a crown colony in the northeast, and therefore there is Nagalim for something. Please Google up what they specifically are fighting for. It's Nagalim for, and a religious figure is specifically mentioned. With all these insurgencies going on, surprisingly, it is the Hindu who is the constant subject of scrutiny, whereas everybody else is spared scrutiny and the rod. So therefore the point is, the Hindu has proved herself, not himself, herself, because Sabarimala, herself, to be more than open to reform in every possible way, because way before untouchability was abolished under Article 17 of the Constitution, the temple entry movement was initiated by the Maharaja of Travancore in 1936. That was already done. So several people, inward-looking people, were more than happy, if at all the Dharma Shastras warranted it, they were more than happy to say, we have to move on. So therefore, I'm merely saying that this particular community perhaps doesn't get the credit that it deserves, and it gets, let's say, more scrutiny than it deserves, whereas everybody else is spared scrutiny. That's point number one. Point number two, any concept must be understood, as Dr. Tharoor rightly points out, in historical context. I completely understand, but it should not be divorced from the unique cultural experience and historical experience of any community. So nationalism, when spouted by a European who's fundamentally a colonizer, is not the same as nationalism from Savarkar or anybody else who's the victim of colonization at the end of the day, who's witnessed two successive waves of colonization running for at least 1400 years. So to say that when we speak of nationalism, it's the same as European supremacism, I'm sorry to say, is to compare apples with oranges, where you're divorcing the entire history and focusing exclusively on the statement. Here, when we speak of nationalism, it is merely a call for throwing off the yoke of colonialism of two kinds. Therefore, this should not be compared with Europeans for the simple reason that you're comparing the victim with the oppressor and the aggressor. That, according to me, there couldn't have been a greater insult to a victimized and a